Welcome to Dcures Albuphet, episode 5, take 3. Oh
Take
my
three.
God. So listen. This is gonna be an amazing episode. Why? Because it's just the third time the charm in. This album is a phenomenal album. Jumping into it from the very beginning, from the first song, Jumping on My Bed. It immediately puts me in this position to where I feel like I'm 5. Like I feel like I'm 5, 6 years old. Like I'm jumping on my bunk bed. Like I'm thinking about pirates. I'm thinking about freaking the Pirates of the Caribbean. I'm thinking about Tony Hawk. I'm thinking about Magmar. And
Eating red vines.
bro, yeah, I never actually. I'll be real. I never had a red vine. I don't like Twizzlers, but apparently
Not
red vines are
okay.
better. I don't know.
They're way
Um,
better. They're
I
actual
also
licorice.
Okay, I might have to try them, but yeah, never had them. I also never had a paper route, and so
Oh
we,
man, good
bro.
thing.
So, so what made you? I know we talked about it last week, kind of getting into it, like you wanting to return to your roots and kind of just get ready for what would be enemy coming up, and kind of talking about like life, your walk with Christ, how it all began, and getting back into the roots of your childhood and stuff like that. So what made you decide to start off the album with Jumping on My Bed? Like, how did that song come about? How did that beat come about? Because, like, I'll tell you one thing, this entire album, I love every beat to every song.
Awesome. Yeah, so this album was just about like going back and remembering who I was because I got so lost, you know what I mean, with all the drinking and not following God and just following my own desires and instincts, you know. So I wanted to just go back and remember who Dcure or Andrew was to begin with, and kind of, just felt like it would help me to be planted and more well grounded if I, remembered at heart who I am, because man, I got so lost. Things were so dark that I think it was just necessary for me to remember young, nerdy Andrew playing video games and jumping on his bed and, you know, pirates and monsters and Frankenstein.
Well, I think that's the best part about it too, Ray, is because when you listen to most rappers and or artists, you don't really know them, right? And being able to listen to this album really gives us an understanding and an insight on who
Mm-hmm.
DCURE is and how you grew up and stuff like that. And it also, listening to this album, it made me appreciate my life, and it made me look back at my own life, and it made me think
Yeah.
about my own memories. And it, like, dude, I'm playing it made me, I haven't played Tony Hawk since like it first came out, the remastered version. And so I pulled it up, I started playing it, and then all of a sudden I started thinking about like life, and I was like, bro, like there was a time in your life where you were growing up playing this game at like 7 or 8 years old, and it was just you in your basement by yourself, nobody else.
Yep.
And now you're 32, you're playing it in your house, you're playing it with your children surrounding you and your family surrounding you. And I was just like, it made me really think about like reminiscing and thinking about like, wow, like look at how far like I've come and my family. So like this whole
Yeah.
album, that's really what it did for me. And then like you're talking about like where you've come, with sobriety and alcoholism, and to be able to look back and see like what God's done through your life and your walk with Him and stuff like that, that made me do the same thing. And I was like, dude, and then when we talk about like old friends, like that song is probably, to be honest, I think that's one of my all-time favorite DCure songs, if
Thank
not
you.
all-time favorite songs in life.
That song actually was super special too, because that's when I first met up with Home Field Productions, and that was our first video we shot. So that was a big like, milestone for like actually getting legit music videos. But yeah, that song, I mean, all my old friends feel like, I have maybe one, that I still keep in touch with, but man, most of them, we probably wouldn't get along today.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing about it, and that's why I love that song, because I resonate a lot with it, because it's the same thing for me. Like I have all these people that I grew up with that I thought were going to be my best friends, people that I thought like,
Yeah.
oh, I can't wait till I have a house and I have a backyard. And guess what? I have a house and I have a backyard, and none of those people are in my life anymore.
Right.
So and I look back at it, and I have like one or two of them that are still left. But that song really just it really just talks to like how once you start changing, who's left around you. And and I like how in this album, like we were speaking about in the first few episodes, how in this album you really start talking about your faith, but you
Yeah.
also talk about it from the innocent young age, and how it wasn't cool to be a Christian. And it's like, so
Yeah, for sure.
can you kind of talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's a huge thing that, like, in the Christian faith, I feel like that's a huge thing that maybe sometimes we don't prepare our kids for, because like we really don't, like you said before, like I don't know what I'm saving myself from, or what is Jesus saving me
Right.
from. And then as a young adolescent, you get into this life, and now you decide, you know what, I'm going to pick up my cross, and I'm going to die to myself, and I'm going to start being a Christian. And then all of a sudden it's not the cool thing to do, so people now start making fun of you for it if you bring it up. So like,
Yeah.
so can you kind of talk about that from your own experience?
Yeah. I mean, I was always kind of bullied and teased about going to church and being a Christian. And so I think a lot of the time the peer pressure kind of made me turn away from that, to be, shy, and to not talk about my beliefs because, I didn't want to be made fun of. I don't think anyone does. Um, and that's something I kind of touch on it on the song Rewind too. I'm
Mhm.
kind of talking about how um, I spent all this time letting people kind of dictate, which way I was going to go. But at the end of the day, I just came right back to who I was. And that's what was so important about this album, because I came back to who I was. You know what I mean? Like, I've spent 10, 20 years like doing whatever I wanted to do, doing things that people thought um, was okay to do, what I felt, was accepted by other people, and I ultimately got lost, and, lost who I was. And so um, don't let people tell you anything. Like,
Yeah.
you need to believe what you believe. You
Mhm.
believe it inside for a reason. Um, don't let anyone determine, what you're going to believe, what you're going to do, your faith, your
Mhm.
passions and things, anything. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how many people told me I need to stop rapping. I don't know how many people, told me that I would never amount to anything, that I was just a drunk nobody. Um, but at the end of the day, when God was like, okay, that's enough, um, I returned to the things that I loved, the things that I believed in, and what I believed I wanted to be. And I think it kind of shows now, the result of what you can achieve if, you just truly follow and latch on to the things that you believe and love. Um, you will see the fruits of your labor. But man, I got absolutely nowhere. Spent so much time and money and energy and terrible relationships and bad people just to come to an end and have to start over. So I mean, you can try it,
Yeah.
but man, don't let people tell you God isn't real.
Yeah.
Man.
And
Yeah.
it's crazy, like, and it's crazy because like every week I say the same thing. It's like every album that I'm listening to as we're going through this is like, it's like that week, that's exactly what's going on in my life, right?
That's
And
cool.
I went to church this morning, and I was talking to this so, well, actually 2 weeks ago I went to church, and there was this guy who was at
Yeah.
church. He's like 80, he was in his late 70s, I believe. And he was just in the hospital, and he was like on his deathbed.
Mm.
And he came to church then like a week later, like in church on his deathbed, like in the
Yeah.
hospital on his deathbed. A week later, he's in church, and he's at men's Bible study, and he's talking to everybody about it. And he's like, it just wasn't God's design to take me. And then a week later, the next Bible study, God had taken him to be home. And but what I was telling
Mm.
his friend today, and the guy who leads the Bible study, I was like, dude, I wasn't gonna come to church that night. Like that day, I was like, I'm not gonna go to church. Like it was like whatever. I don't know what it was, but I was like, I'm not gonna go. And my wife had come home, and she's like, "Oh, you're staying home tonight, right?" Like joking, not really like, "Oh, you're not going to church." It was just like a joke,
Right.
like, "Oh, we haven't seen each other all day. Like you should stay home." And I was like, "No, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go." And I really didn't want to. And that's when I saw Kenny. And then I was sitting there next to this elderly man who was just told he's going to die in the hospital, and now he's in church. And I'm like, and it hit me at that moment, and that's when I started looking
Mm.
at like life and stuff. And I'm like, dude, like I need this man's faith. Like I was like, I need this man's stead. It's like he's standing firm in the Lord. Like this guy was just told he's gonna die, and now he's sitting here in the church. He's and he's worshiping and he's praying and all this stuff. And he's
Yeah.
asking me, someone he's never known, like he's sharing his testimony. And then the following week, we find out like, hey, he actually went to be with the Lord. But I was telling his friend today, Greg, I was just like talking to him about life, and Greg was sharing his life story about like how like he was an alcoholic and how all these things happened in his lifetime, and now how like this came back to him. And the biggest thing with the guy Kenny that had now passed on was like that was his story. Like he was this whole other person for 30 years. And then now, he lived on it. And I think the reason why I want to bring this up is just because, with what your music talks about is it talks about the forgiveness and the grace of God. And it's able to, like, it reminds us that like we are going to be tested and tried every single day, and we're not going to become who we are if we're not tested and tried every day. And it's these things that make us who we are, and get us to that end of that road, and finish that good fight. And then now, mind you, I'm not saying like, hey, you should go out and seek these things purposely, like you should do that. I'm not saying that.
You're gonna.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you're gonna do what you want.
Exactly. And but I think what's amazing though is that God brings us back. Like God, he's there beside us, and he brings, he's there, he calms the still waters, and he's there beside us whether we want him to be or not, whether we acknowledge that he's beside us, whether any of those things happen. And for us to be able to just look back at our story, because I think that the other thing too is that like, where we look back at life, man, and I look at some people, and I say this to myself all the time, like, when you talk about like mass murderers and stuff like that, it's like, how did this person become this person, right? And it's like, but we were all at one point or another like these innocent children, and then life happens.
Gradually, yeah. I mean, it's like you were talking about. I mean, the little thought of I'm not feeling going to church. That's like the time you need it the most. You know what I mean? Like the time you're going to see something that changes your perspective on life in a big way. I mean, you met Kenny, and that was a big one for you. So I mean, that just shows, that God, has reason and purpose in these little moments and stuff. So it's pretty incredible. But yeah, man.
So what's your favorite song on the album? Do you have a favorite song on the album?
I like probably Jumping on My Bed, but I also like Rewind a lot, because I'm kind of summing up the whole, talking about how I was like a nerd that played video games and collected Pokemon cards, and had a crazy sweet tooth. And I got made fun of for that stuff. But at the end of the day, like, that's who I am. That's a part of my journey. And so there's no reason to be ashamed or embarrassed about, the nerdy things or my faith, things that I let people pull me away from. And so Rewind was important, because I'm just saying, like, you can't start over. So just embrace where you're at, embrace who you are.
I think one of my favorite things is that as we're talking about this, I see Snorlax in the background, like just chilling.
You see him?
Yep, I see Snorlax. But
yeah, man, this skateboard deck has Bulbasaur on it.
Oh, bro. So is it? Oh,
I can hear you.
Dude, that's so dope. That is so dope. Bro, is it? So does it at all bother you, or does it make you laugh that like the things that you were made fun of are actually now like really popular?
Yeah, I mean, that's funny too. I mean, like except Dumbo.
Yeah,
Dumbo ain't that popular, but yeah, Pokemon, Nintendo, like comic books, all that stuff is super popular now, which is strange. I just had to hold off hold out for 20 years
Yeah, right.
and just wait for it.
But it's just crazy how life changes, bro. Like Mario's a huge thing now. Everything's coming
Like, oh, I'm
back.
cool now.
Yeah, yeah, right.
I just was in the wrong time.
Yo, right.
I
Wrong
like
time
stuff too
zone, bro.
soon.
Yeah, yo, you were beyond your years.
Yeah.
So tell me about this paper route, bro, because I think this whole that whole song and everything
Man,
that with your brother and everything, like I think it is like it sounds like a lot of, and this is the crazy thing about your music, and I find this all the time, is that a lot of the stories that you tell, they seem like they're like not reality. Like I feel like a
man,
lot
that
of
was
stuff that
super
you
real.
talk about, you know.
So, man, the papers used to come. It wasn't so bad like during the week, but on Sunday morning, it would come at like 5 a.m. and the stack would be like 3 times thicker than usual. Like the Sunday paper is a monster,
Yeah, yeah.
and a regular paper just said, nothing crazy. But yeah, so waking up early on Sunday to like go do the paper out before church was a nightmare. I mean, like, you're already going to school as a kid. The last thing you want to do is wake up super early on the weekend because you're already having to wake up early for school. And so, man, you just be, me and Adam would be rolling our papers at like 5:30 in the morning, and those things turn your hands like black just from rolling the papers. Like, we just have rubber bands, and once you're done, like, it's a mess. All the ink's on your hands. Like trying to balance that thing. If you pull, I'm saying, you pull too many out of one side, because there was like 2 bags right on each handlebars. And so if it got lopsided, like, I'm saying, you'd be struggling to stay upright. I mean, you're a kid, you know what I mean? Like the papers weigh like half what you weigh. So like, man, that was a mess. Like being a kid, and my paper route was further away. So I had to like bike like half a mile to get to before I even started. Like I had a smaller paper route than my older brother, but man, not fun. Like you're dealing with dogs. Like you go up to drop the thing and dogs are barking at you. Like
Bro,
in the
I'll tell you.
rain. Yeah.
Yeah, well, bro, when I was a mailman, when I was a mailman for the postal service, like
Oh man.
I was
Yeah.
deathly afraid of dogs, bro. Like I went from being the biggest dog lover in my life to becoming a mailman for 5 or 6 years, bro. And that was like the scary,
Man.
like, dude, being attacked by dogs, like, bro, bro, life changing.
Yeah. Those dogs
So
think you're trying to come after their
yeah,
owners.
man. And then every day you're coming back, so it's like, bro, like, yo, you haven't learned your
You
lesson,
trying
like.
again? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like, yo, this is my territory. But yo, so where did where did that come from? Because I'm pretty sure is this the first album where you used it? Because you use it in this album. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I
Where
use
did
that
this
on
come
paper
from?
route.
Yeah. Where did it
It
come from? Is
just,
it something that you just
I'm
been
sure
doing your
it's
whole
something
life? Or?
yeah, I'm sure it's something I've said my whole life, but obviously it got big with the dad joke stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I've never said all right. You know what I mean? It's just, I was like, ah.
Yeah.
Just
Because I
like,
heard it in the album. I was like, oh, okay. Is this where it started?
always
Got it.
abbreviating and cutting stuff short. I think that's just a rapper thing too, like cutting out words and letters.
Bro, how does that, so let me run me through this, man. Like, how does, I want to, and I know I've asked this, and I've asked TMR the same thing, but like, how do you make music and then incorporate things like Magmar into a song? And then like you talk about the Ninja Turtles, and you talk about like, how do you incorporate that into just a lyric? And then also your Instagram post, you were like, did you like that line? And then immediately I was like, well, actually, if you think about it, Tony Hawk, when you do any of those tricks, that's a line.
That's
So
right. So you're going to become a rapper soon enough. All this analyzing lyrics and stuff. Man, I think that's just, a part of, sometimes you just rhyme something. Like usually I'll just write a line, and
Mhm.
then like I like to get creative, with the second line after that. Like, what rhymes with this that's different? And throwing things like magmar in there is like a word you'd never hear in a rap, but it like embraced my nerdiness and rhymed. So yeah, that whole like song about going outside with a stick and pretending like I was fighting off monsters and casting spells,
Yo.
like I was already Harry Potter way before he was. You know what I mean? Like, I was already dorking out, waving the stick around with me and my brothers, man. Um, yeah, just like using your imagination. So I think imagination, helps me to be lyrical. Like all those times I had to just depend on my own mind, to create scenarios. I said, like, you walk past that tree and you teleport, like just, creating things. I think the hardship of being made fun of, being different helped me to, have all these ways to defend myself lyrically. And I always thought I'd be good at battle rap if I ever did that, but I'm glad I didn't, because I think you have to get pretty hateful to do that stuff, without trying to hold too many grudges. So I'm glad I didn't get into that. But yeah, I mean, that's another tool for the tool belt.
So how do you, so like, kind of run us with this too, like what when did it happen where you went from being like this nerdy kid, well you still are, right? You're just a nerdy adult at this point.
Yeah.
But like when did it, like the alcoholism like start? Like when did the alcohol abuse start, the drugs, like because you talk about that in the album as well. So like when do you go from this kid who's focused on having fun and a paper route and focused on just life in general and going to church on Sundays to now kind of transitioning into, this person who's, seeking out other things? Like
Yeah.
how did that happen?
Just in high school, you slowly get braver and braver and want to try other things. It's a weekend. You end up, you want to be cool. You want to be invited to the party. Um, and I smoked weed probably for the first time when I was like 14 or 15. Um, and then you want to try other things. You want to drink. You got to ask, someone that's old enough to buy alcohol. I think I was working at Marshall's for a time, and there was actually a guy that was in the Air Force that was like someone I looked up to. He was like retired from the Air Force or whatever, or separated. He was the air traffic controller, and he was a cool dude. He's like in his mid-20s, and he used to buy me and the homies 40s. And so, I'd give him some extra money and just say, keep the change kind of thing. But yeah, and then it just progressed from there. How do I get my hands on a bottle of vodka? I was drinking screwdrivers before I would go to school, like before I got on the bus as a senior,
Bro.
like stuff like that. Yes. I mean, honestly, it just progressed, and that's what alcoholism does, man. And so, you start with little things, and then you get brave, and then at a point you just don't care. Until it's so bad that you have to care because you're embarrassed of how bad it is. You're embarrassed of people seeing you like that. So, alcoholism is a progressive illness, as they say. And they say when you pick it back up, you just start right back where you were when you stopped. And I'm a testament to that. I went a year without drinking and was like, oh, I'm going to be fine this time. And I think I had one night I didn't black out, and then right back to blacking out. I was like, I'm gonna do okay tonight. I'm only gonna buy like a 6-pack, and I think I stuck with it. I was proud, and then,
Yeah.
double digits.
And I think what sucks the most is that like as you're like growing up and you start, because like I'll be honest, dude, that I think the first time I smoked, I was in like the 8th grade, so I was like maybe like 11 or 12 years old, I think, and and that's when I started like smoking, drinking,
Yeah,
and like all through high school, and and it's crazy because like I wish I could look at myself now and be like, bro, don't even start. Like, just don't even start, bro. Like,
Yeah.
it's something you're gonna battle with the rest of your life, bro. Like, don't put this image in your body. Don't start doing this. It's the same thing with like pornography or whatever it is. Like, you
Yep.
have this, you for a moment you look at something, then the rest of your entire life it's in your mind and you can't get rid of it. And it's just crazy like how the mind works and how but it's also even worse because like you're around these people that you call friends, and then if you really start looking into it and you start looking around you, it's like, bro, we're not even doing anything good. And you look forward
Right.
to it, and you look
You're
forward to
just
it.
curious. Yeah.
Yeah, like you're and it just sucks because like in order for you to and it sucks because I'm like myself, right? Like I look at my kids and I'm like, wow, like I really hope they don't do what I did. And but then it's like, okay, well they're
Yeah.
probably going to, and I can't protect them from life. So it's
Yeah.
like it's because like I'm sure my father didn't want me to do the things that I did, but my
For
father
sure.
still, I mean, and it's just like it sucks, like you tell someone, hey, don't touch the burning stove, and what do? And now
You
looking
gotta
back at
you
life,
gotta
man, like
learn.
yeah, yeah. Like you gotta learn and you gotta understand, but it's just tough, man. But that's why
Yeah.
I love your music because it's very easy to just listen to it and reminisce in it and then understand too that like I think the biggest thing for me is being able to listen to your music and understand that like my whole entire life I felt like I was alone and I was the only person who felt this way about these things. And then I'm listening to your music and I'm like, wait a minute, this guy feels the same way. And then you
Yeah.
find out, the more and more you start talking to people, you find out that, bro, you're actually like not the only one. It's like every dude feels this way, but they don't want to talk about it.
That's why it's always super important for me to just be honest. I think that's something that a lot of people from like maybe our generation or an older generation have had a super hard time doing, just like admitting fault, like saying what their downfalls are. Um, I feel like that's something we've never learned to communicate, but that's
Yeah.
something, that I found a lot of strength in because almost every time, I say something super personal that was hard to say, someone, is like, this is my favorite song. This is incredible. And so it's just
Yeah.
like God put it in my heart to be honest and to share, vulnerable things and to just be vulnerable. And so that's what I was going to go ahead and do.
Yeah.
I think it helps us all, to see that we're just trying to figure it all out as kids. We're just curious to see, what the world has to offer, what's out there. We stumble across things that are bad for us, and sometimes we get hooked on them. And we fight to find a better way to live, but sometimes we stay hooked on those things for a long time. The store I mentioned in Jumping on My Bed, Hastings, they used to throw out dirty magazines like behind the building and the dumpster, and we used to find those as kids. Like that was like another thing I was hooked on as a kid. But man, you'll find it. You'll find anything you want to find as a kid.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then you're
that's
just
why,
like, man,
but what's even crazier though is that like when we were a kid, and I heard someone talking about this at some point, but like when we were a kid, in order for you to find pornography, like you had to go out of your way to find it.
yeah,
Like you had to go dumpster diving, or like for me, like I used to live above an apartment. I used to live in an apartment above a video store, and in the video store, when you would walk in, all the way in the back, there was the pornography section, but it had a guard in like
for
dude
sure. Yeah.
sitting at the table, like you couldn't get back there unless you showed him your ID, and like so we would go outside, and there was this little hole in the door where like you could peek up and like you could see like a picture or something, and it was like, yeah,
Yeah.
and like and I was the cool kid because I found that out, but it's like but now in today's world, like you're walking around with a phone that you can see all the pornography in the world that you
Find
want to,
anything. Yeah.
and you can find anything, and then all the different algorithms and the things that like kids are getting involved in at such an early age, and the way that like even drugs, man, like even
Yeah.
when you were when at our age, like it was hard to get a hold of drugs or get a hold of
Very.
alcohol. Like now it's so easily accessible in all these different forms. So it's like, wow, like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Like we want to try things, but it's also like, dude, like things are so different now. Like, bro, all the time
We
I'm
used to
like,
have to work for it.
yeah,
We had to
like,
sweat
bro,
a
I
little
don't,
to get stuff.
bro, I would, like, dude, I would be a lot, and I thank God I was not born in today's day and age, because I'd be a
Yeah.
lot worse off. I think, like, I'd be like,
Same.
like, bro, no
People are
way.
worse off. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
dude, it's,
people, man, people don't know
yeah,
who they are. People
yeah.
are, easily manipulated and
Mhm.
just curious. Maybe I'm that way.
Yeah.
It's scary.
Well, and it's even tougher too, though, because like instead of back in the day when things like that happened, like people were bold to say like, "Hey, that's not right."
Yeah.
Now that's not allowed in some
Right.
places. Like now it's like, "Oh, you can't tell that person that's not okay." Like we
Right.
have to accept this, and now everything's becoming accepted under this umbrella, and it's just like, bro, like no, man, like this is
We're
not okay, and this can't
we're
be okay. And
accepting every idea that someone thought up. Like someone thought this weird thing up that they wanted to be this, and we have to like, okay, yeah, maybe you
yeah,
are. It's
yeah,
crazy.
it's dude,
Yeah, you
it's
just get smacked around when you were young, but not anymore.
no, yeah, now it's like, "Oh, yeah, okay, you identify as a cat? Awesome. Here's a cat litter pan in the school for the cats." Like, "What?" But
Yeah.
yeah. So was there any song on the album that you felt was like a specific, like one of your favorite lines or anything like that you caught up this week, like while you were listening to it?
Man, I think jumping on my bed has a lot of them.
Yeah,
The whole
bro, it
like,
really does. Like that whole first song is just like
yeah,
littered
I kind
with
of let loose.
that's why I made that
Uh,
reel with all of the different things in the first song. I was
yeah.
listening to it, finding different gifts. I was like, bro, this guy's insane. So what do we have in store next? We have Enemy, right?
Man. Yeah, Dcure was big, but we're ramping up to potentially the biggest album. Definitely the one that did the best, the one that people responded to the most for sure. I don't know how many times, people hit me up about Home or He Is With Me. I mean, there are tons of good songs on Enemy. And then I did two. I did a part two. So we might have to
Yes, you did.
extend next
Oh,
week's
yeah,
episode by
yeah,
10 minutes or so.
yeah,
But yeah, man, I
bro.
would cray. I was so pleased with Enemy that I
Yeah,
was like, man, I think there's more to say. And, I
amen.
just really wanted to kind of get it all out there. But yeah, the Enemy is flourishing in our world. And I just felt like, I wanted to really drive it home and let people know that the enemy's trying to get you, but God is the way, uh,
Mm.
the truth, and the life also.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
So yeah, it's
Bro,
gonna be
and I'll
exciting.
tell you, it is, man, because I think it's hard to pick which album is my favorite album, but that was the album that introduced me to you.
Yeah,
And that was the
so
album
big.
that,
Yeah,
like, yeah, like that when I first started talking to you and everything, and it's just a beautiful. So if you're listening right now, or you're listening tomorrow, or whenever you get to catch this episode, please, if you do anything for me and Dcure, go listen to Enemy, listen to one, listen to two, and just dive into it. Because, and listen, even if you're not a Christian, if you don't believe in God, I don't care. You face an enemy every single day of the week, whether you want to
yeah,
put the name on that as as the devil or not, whether it's yourself. And this is what he talks about in the album: is we all have an enemy. And I'll tell you this much, man, the way that he speaks about the gospel in the album and the way that he gives it to you is easily digestible, and it'll definitely have you looking at yourself in a different light, and looking at yourself in the way that you live and the way that you do things, and you're just looking at everything from different perspectives, and it really just puts you into a different headspace. So definitely listen to Enemy 1 and 2. And then we'll be back next week on Tuesday, same time, 9 p.m. Hopefully we won't have to do 5 different takes, but Dcure, thank you so much for this evening.
thank
I
you.
appreciate you, brother, and I look forward to talking to you next week.
Same here, man. Thanks so
All
much.
right. Yes, sir.